This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon. We're coming back on the air for this extraordinary and historic battle unfolding on Capitol Hill at this hour. On this, the first day of the 118th Congress, the first day of the House under Republican control. And for the first time in a century in this country, the vote for House Speaker has gone to a second ballot and still no leader. Kevin McCarthy failing to get the votes he needs. The math essentially did not change in this second round of balloting. What did is that the 19 Republican votes that did not go to Kevin McCarthy this time all went to Congressman Jim Jordan. You see there on the screen. This will now head to a third round of voting. Congressman Jim Jordan, who received 6 votes in that first round, had actually nominated McCarthy this time before the second round of voting began. But then Jordan receiving even more votes the second time after Congressman Matt Gaetz nominated Jim Jordan for Speaker instead of McCarthy. Also making history today, for the second time today, the leader of the party not in power in the House anymore, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries in the minority party, earning more votes than the majority, twice in the first round and in the second round of votes. He led in that first round as well. Again, this will now head to a third ballot. McCarthy vowing to fight as long as this takes to win the gavel. But the question at this hour, as we watch history unfold here, will these 19 votes, these 19 members of Congress, be determined to block him, to block Kevin McCarthy? Will there be somebody else who emerges? Let's get to our congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, on the Hill. Rachel, this is uncharted territory. What happens next here?
Well, this is essentially a staring contest between two groups of Republicans, the ones that are backing Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and the ones who say that they will not. At this point, if you are Kevin McCarthy, you are starting to wonder whether or not your strategy here is working. He has already made some major concessions, including making it easier to remove him from the position of Speaker if he were to be elected. He's huddled with Republicans behind closed doors this morning, making an impassioned plea for them, telling them that he will not stand down, that he's willing to battle this out. One by one, we've seen members actually go into his office. He's actually moved into the Speaker's office, even though he does not have the votes to be the next Speaker of the House. We know that he's currently leaving the chamber. We can imagine that he's going to be trying to make another pitch to some of these Republicans, trying to convince them that he deserves to be the next Speaker. But at this point, it's clear he does not have the votes. And I just checked in with a source close to McCarthy who told me that nothing has changed at this point. He is willing for this to go on as long as it takes. And again, David, the House is essentially paralyzed at this point. No legislating, no bills can be passed until there's a Speaker of the House.
Paralyzed at this point. It's fairly new, early in the new Congress. But again, as Rachel points out there, and Rachel, we'll get a follow-up here for you, no business can proceed until they actually have a Speaker of the House. Rachel, you mentioned that Kevin McCarthy moved into the Speaker's office ahead of time, ahead of this vote, still confident he will be the Speaker of the House when this is all said and done. A question for you, and it might be impossible to answer at this point, but folks at home are going to start wondering, when you've got Jim Jordan essentially endorsing Kevin McCarthy on the floor, and then Matt Gaetz coming out and endorsing, Jim Jordan, then he gets the 19 votes. Is this something that they knew was going to play out here today? Was this part of some alternate plan? Did Jim Jordan know this was coming?
I don't think Congressman Jim Jordan knew this was coming. He actually told our colleagues that he didn't see this coming at all. He didn't want Matt Gaetz to nominate him for Speaker because he is supporting Kevin McCarthy. But as you can see, this is sort of a back and forth. And as you mentioned, this is, in fact, uncharted territory that we're moving into, because no one here in this Congress right now was obviously here 100 years ago for the last fight that when this came down to a nominee losing the first ballot. So right now, it is unclear just exactly where we go from here. If this comes up for a third ballot, we could see these 19 Republicans back another Republican. But at this point, it's still clear that Kevin McCarthy just does not have the votes, David.
And Rachel, you mentioned Jim Jordan didn't know this, says he doesn't want to be Speaker of the House. So is there a possibility here that somebody else now emerges as a potential sort of alternative to Kevin McCarthy, given the fact that these 19 members of Congress appear to be determined to keep McCarthy from the role?
Yes, that is a possibility. But then the question is, can that person get the votes that they need in order to become the next speaker? If Kevin McCarthy can't do it and he has the support of the majority of the conference, will someone else, the number two in leadership, Steve Scalise, will the number three, Elise Stefanik, will they be able to capture the Republican support that will be necessary in order to clinch the speaker's gavel? Right now, no Republican at that point has the numbers, which is why we are seeing this move to multiple ballots, multiple rounds of voting, the first time that this has happened in a century, David.
Incredible. Rachel Scott, great reporting as always. Let's put the numbers up on the screen for folks at home so they can see this as we take this to John Karl. And again, quite something, John. Kevin McCarthy with 203 votes, Hakeem Jeffries with 212 votes, the second round of balloting where you have the minority party, the leader of the Democrats, actually beating the Republican. Obviously, he doesn't have the majority that he needs to become House Speaker. But this is quite something to have this happen in 2 rounds with no answer on where this is all headed.
No answer, and the exact same number of Republican defections, 19 Republicans voting for somebody other than Kevin McCarthy. What changed in the second round is that all of them coalesced around a single alternative, that's Jim Jordan. And a little bit of Republican House history is in order. It was 8 years ago when McCarthy believed he was in line to become Speaker of the House after the Republicans had won back control in 2014. And it was Jim Jordan who led the opposition to Kevin McCarthy back then and sunk his chances to become Speaker. Ended up becoming Paul Ryan, of course. Since then, Jordan and McCarthy have worked very closely. Jordan has been supporting him. But I have to tell you, David, I sat in that chamber and listened to Jim Jordan's nominating speech for the second round. He stepped forward to put McCarthy's name in for this second ballot. And that was a speech that said almost nothing about Kevin McCarthy. He was speaking about the way the House operates. He was speaking about basically how he thought things had to be run differently. He did, his first couple of sentences were about Kevin McCarthy, but the rest of his speech was a speech that sounded like a campaign speech to become Speaker of the House. That said, Jordan did not vote for himself in that round. He voted for Kevin McCarthy, but we clearly have a long way to go here. I think we will not just see a third ballot. I think we will see a third, a fourth ballot, and who knows beyond that. Yeah,
that was quite a speech. Was extraordinary. Mentioned Kevin McCarthy in the beginning, but then, as John points out, went on to talk about what these 19 members want instead, the issues that they believe are most important. And John Karl, that was quite something when Congressman Matt Gaetz got up there, endorsed Jim Jordan, and essentially said that Kevin McCarthy had sold himself along the way.
And, and keep in mind, this started as a rebellion of 5 Republicans, because that was all you needed. This majority is so narrow that 5 Republicans can sink a speaker. So it was the 5, hardline conservative Republicans led by Matt Gaetz who stood up and eventually, led to that first ballot where you had 19 of them voting against. But here's the thing. If we go on further here and there's a movement towards Jim Jordan, there may well be at least 5 or more moderate Republicans in the House that don't feel comfortable with Jim Jordan as Speaker. So again, you asked Rachel about new names emerging. I mean, I was looking very closely at Steve Scalise sitting just across the aisle from Kevin McCarthy as all this was going on. He's quietly supporting McCarthy over and over again. He's somebody to watch, and there are others.
John, Rachel, our powerhouse team there. One more question for both of you. I wonder if there's a lesson in here about not moving into the Speaker's office before you have the vote locked up. And how long could we be here? I mean, we're, again, in uncharted territory, as I mentioned. You have to go back well more than a century to see multiple rounds of balloting beyond the second round.
I mean, look, we saw Rachel mentioned the, what was it, 1856? Yep. I think that was before your time. It went for 2 months. It went well over 100 rounds of balloting. I don't expect it will go that long, although, Gaetz is out there talking about how the cherry blossoms could be blooming. That happens in March, as you well know, David. So this could go on for a long time.
And
members
Rachel,
here are expecting for a very long night, David. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Rachel, a quick question for you, because you've talked to so many of the centrist Republicans, more moderate Republicans in that chamber. There has got to be a lot of frustration about what they're witnessing unfold today. It does not look good for them. The optics are simply horrible for those who did want Kevin McCarthy as their leader.
Oh, definitely. And this is supposed to be a day. I mean, we are talking about how historic this is, David, but the first day of a new Congress, we have families sitting in the chamber. Members bring their children. They're supposed to get sworn into office. None of that is happening at this point. So you have a group of moderate Republicans that are growing extremely frustrated, especially because they're supposed to be riding this high after clinching a very narrow majority in the House. Listen, it wasn't the wide majority that they wanted, which is why Kevin McCarthy is in this position position in the first place, but they are ready to get on with it so they can start moving on to the business of Congress, David.
All right, going to be a long night ahead. Rachel, John will both be on World News. We'll see you a short time from now. For that, let's get to our political director. A quick question before we go to Rick Klein, because Rick, a bit messy as we watch history unfold today, but the Republicans will still maintain control of the House. What does this mean, though, if Kevin McCarthy does in fact become the speaker at the end of this day or end of these 24 hours, or perhaps somebody else emerges as well? Republicans still in control of the House. What does that mean for the Biden administration moving forward?
David, this was supposed to be the easy part. All they're doing is choosing a leader, and they can't do that. And now the question is, how much more negotiating room does Kevin McCarthy have? What else is he willing to give away about his own power as House Speaker? This next vote may be an absolutely critical one for his future, as well as for the contours of the speakership in this era of divided government. Republicans off to a flat, terrible start, not what they envisioned when they looked back and saw their opportunities in the midterms, not what they thought would happen when they took back control of the House.
And Rick, Kevin McCarthy already conceded to this group of Republicans that he would make it easier to get rid of the speaker if they wanted that down the road. What does that mean about, should he become speaker here, his control of Republicans in the House and trying to get them to coalesce around any sort of agenda moving forward as one party?
That's the central issue. Look, he could get this done right now if he were to empower any one Republican member to have a vote on his job at any given time. That would make things happen for Matt Gaetz and all the holdouts. But as of now, he doesn't want to give that because he recognizes that puts a sword over his head as the House Speaker. Now the task of actually governing is going to become just that much more difficult. And we saw that key number of 19 holdouts not budging between the votes. That begins to shift the pressure, not from those holdouts, but to Kevin McCarthy himself. He's the guy that has to deliver for Republicans. If he can't get his own members to budge, that's not a great sign either.
Yeah, and if he gives in on that, we'll be going through this all over again a number of times in the future here, if and when he does become Speaker. If he were to give in on this potential idea that any one member of Congress could say, we don't like the job you're doing. All right, Rick Kleiner, thanks to you. We're looking at live pictures there. That's the outgoing Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Hakeem Jeffries, certainly a day of history for the two of them as well, though not expected in quite this way. Hakeem Jeffries in 2 rounds of balloting now, leading Kevin McCarthy. Also something we have not seen. Again, extraordinary that the party in power not able to elect a speaker. We haven't seen this in 100 years in this country. We'll see what the next few hours brings. Our coverage will continue on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. And of course, as I mentioned to John and Rachel there, they'll both be back with me, the entire team for World News tonight. I'm David Muir in New York. Until then, see you soon. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.